Chapter 7, You Got This, Building a Classroom Culture of Self-Efficacy. My classroom community. I had the pleasure of being a third grade teacher to an immensely kind and extremely shy girl named Ada. There was no way around it. Ada entered our third grade classroom with significant academic needs. At home, she spoke Spanish with a severe lisp, which her family could understand, but at school, the anxiety of not being understood kept her silent most of the time. She almost never raised her hand to answer a question and hardly interacted with the other children in meaningful ways. Ada did not say a single word to me for the first 3 weeks of school. But I soon realized these barriers did not stop Ada from working hard. She was rarely absent from school and never missed a single homework assignment during the entire school year. When I worked with her, I deliberately and consistently praised her efforts. Each time I made sure to find an incremental improvement, no matter how small, to show her. I used these successes as evidence to prove to her that she had the ability to learn and grow, no matter how big the challenges seemed to be. One day, all the students in my class were looking at graphs of their reading achievements over the course of the year. Students were sharing with each other how much their reading had improved and explaining what their new goals would be. I showed the class a student's graph on our projection screen. "Look how steep this line is," I said. "This student's reading has shot way up." The other students looked at it, astounded. One boy shouted, "Whoa, that's crazy." Others said, "I can't believe it." With her permission, I finally revealed whose graph it was. "This is a graph of Ada's reading." The class erupted in applause. Ada beamed silently. I made it a point in my class to celebrate Ada's growth and her ability to improve instead of focusing on her skill level, which remained significantly below grade level standards. Through their own hard work and effort, my students proved to themselves that no matter where they start, they have the ability to grow and improve. That's how I build and foster a culture of self-efficacy, where every student believes it's within their ability to reach their academic and life goals. By the end of the school year, the shy little girl who wouldn't speak to me had tripled the rate of her previous academic progress. But even more importantly, Ada demonstrated a huge leap in bravery and confidence when she walked across the stage in front of an audience of thousands to receive the Denver Mayor's Mile High Scholar Award. My teaching philosophy is characterized by the belief that where a student starts does not dictate where they will end up. I don't say this just because it is a nice, fluffy thought or because it is what a teacher should say. I could not get up and go to work each morning if I did not see tangible evidence every day that all children can learn, improve, and grow. That word grow is at the epicenter of every little thing in my classroom. While I, their teacher, believe in each student's ability to learn, I recognize the need for them to cultivate that belief in themselves. Just like a plant, there are many requirements that need to be met before a seed can be coaxed to set out roots and a shoot. The belief that one can grow and that change is possible is essential to the learning process. Before a student can learn, a sense of self-efficacy must be nurtured within themselves. The American Psychological Association says self-efficacy refers to an individual's belief in his or her capacity to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. In order to find success in the classrooms, students need to believe they can be successful. Developing a sense of self-efficacy in our students cannot be skipped over or thought of as just another skill that would be nice to teach in the classroom. If only we had enough time in the day. It is an absolute requirement of learning. Mindsets in the classroom. I have been immensely encouraged by research from Stanford professor Carol Dweck. Dweck's research has defined two distinct mindsets that contribute to the way people, and especially students, interact with the world: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. In the fixed mindset, students believe their abilities and intelligence are stagnant. They have it or they don't. In the growth mindset, however, students realize all people have the ability to improve not only their abilities, but also their intelligence. So many organizations and industries have latched on to the growth mindset movement. Education is no exception. Schools and teachers have embraced it so enthusiastically because we see students replicate the research every day. We see our students learn, grow, adapt, and become smarter throughout a given academic year, down to each week and month, even in a given day. The best teachers know intelligence and critical skills are built through effort and rigorous work over a long period of time. More importantly, it is imperative teachers help students see that as well. One way to help students develop the growth mindset is to change the language of a student's self-talk, the voice of their mindset. Dweck recommends 4 steps. Number 1, learn to hear how your mindset is expressed in your thoughts. Do your thoughts encourage taking on a challenge, or are they overly critical and demoralizing? In our classroom, I use the phrase, catch that thought, what is it saying to you? To help students articulate self-talk. Number 2, acknowledging that you always have a choice. It is so empowering for students to realize they are actually in control of their self-talk and can choose how they think about their abilities, as well as how they approach a challenge. Number 3, actively use the growth mindset to talk to yourself. Instead of students thinking of their failures as proof they are not skilled or competent, coach students to see failures as an opportunity to learn. Helping students understand the way to talk to themselves is key. At our school, we even have a bulletin board with fixed mindset thoughts such as, I'm not good at reading, paired with growth mindset thoughts as, what am I not understanding? How can I work on this? Number 4, take action. Once students hear which mindset occupies the voice in their head and recognize it as a choice and learn to talk to themselves from the stance of a growth mindset, they are able to use the research in real life. Students will pursue academic challenges as opportunities to learn instead of avoiding them as potential opportunities for failure. Teaching the students in your room to develop a growth mindset is not nearly as intimidating as it might sound. I go over the idea of a growth mindset with my students and the steps to developing positive self-talk. And then I use the time-honored technique of teachable moments. When my students say, I can't do this, I am not annoyed. I revel in the opportunity to challenge their self-doubt. In class one day, I showed my students an example of a 6-paragraph essay they would be writing. 6 paragraphs to third graders, many of whom would be writing in their second language, might as well have been a Greek epic. I saw the self-doubt in their faces as their eyes widened and their lower lips dropped. What are you thinking? I asked. That's so long, a student commented. I won't be able to do it, admitted another. I encouraged my students. I actually had the whole class say, this is going to be hard. I will at some point get frustrated and I might even get bored, but I will write this essay. This was a brief interaction with my class. However, repeatedly modeling this ideology, coupled with strong instructional methods, helps students develop a growth mindset. My students see they are able to accomplish difficult tasks. After several days of strategic instruction, every one of my students did write their first essay, and they developed a sense of self-efficacy. Notice, I said, that sometimes when you think you can't do something, you really can. Are we modeling optimism or pessimism? The way our students interpret and respond to setbacks and challenges is a major component of self-efficacy. Part of living from a growth mindset is the belief improvement is possible with sustained effort. The other part is explicitly teaching students they have the ability to accomplish their goals. To do this, we must nurture the endless power of optimism. Optimism is not just seeing the glass as half full. In a psychological context, optimism and pessimism are seen as reflections of how people explain life's events to themselves. Optimistic people believe difficulties in life can be overcome, while a pessimistic person interprets challenges as permanent. A person's tendency to be more pessimistic or optimistic has been shown to greatly affect their life. In his 1995 book, The Optimistic Child, Martin Seligman summarizes his research and points out the dangers of pessimism, saying, pessimism is an entrenched habit of mind that has sweeping and disastrous consequences. Depressed mood, resignation, underachievement, and even unexpectedly poor physical health. It hardens with each setback and becomes self-fulfilling. Whether a person is optimistic or pessimistic can often be picked up on by others, especially children. Theories in cognitive psychology suggest that one way people learn is via social learning. That is, people emulate and duplicate behaviors that they observe in their environment. As teachers, we know our students are not only studying the curriculum, but they are studying us as well. That means that we need to be models of optimism. Our daily thoughts and actions need to demonstrate to students that thinking positively about the world, seeing our setbacks as temporary and changeable, helps us achieve our goals and become more productive and more effective people. Building gritty students. Complementing Dweck's and Seligman's transformative research on optimism is Angela Duckworth from the University of Pennsylvania. Duckworth claims there is a quality beyond intelligence or socioeconomic status that contributes to students' successes. Her research states that some students possess a quality that allows them to overcome adversity and stick with difficult pursuits for prolonged periods of time. She calls this quality grit and has defined grit as the disposition to pursue very long-term goals with passion and perseverance. Her research has found that students with more grit attain higher levels of education, earn higher GPAs, and are more likely to graduate from high school. With outcomes like that, actively teaching grit should be a part of every classroom. Lyon's Perseverance Walk is one specific lesson teachers can implement in their classrooms. It shows that integrating grit does not have to be separate from our academic curriculum, but rather that teaching self-efficacy skills like grit can be academically rigorous, complement our curriculum, as well as become incredibly meaningful to students. As teachers, we can deliberately look for teachable moments to identify grit to our students and value it as an academic skill. Teacher tools. High five, goodbye. The end of the school day is typically pretty hectic around room 207. There is homework to be distributed, tables to wipe down, and inevitably something that slipped my mind until 1 minute before school gets out. I'm working toward making this end of the day a calm and tranquil time, but I have found one thing that helps students, so I leave on the right foot even if it is a little chaotic. On the way out of the school door, I stand at the bottom of the stairs and give each of my students a high five. As our hands meet, each student repeats back a positive affirmation like, I am a world changer, or I can be kind to others. No matter how the day went, no matter how challenging it was, my students and I end with saying something positive. This helps model optimism. This helps model optimism for them. Even though this takes just a few seconds, I have found that this little goodbye, simply a short phrase or sentence, helps to validate the work that students have done and leaves everyone, including myself, feeling just a little better. On a practical level, it has the added benefit of pacing out eager to leave students so they do not trample each other in the hallway. Sometimes I come up with the high five goodbye phrase. I like to tie it to what we have learned that day, like I can fight for justice like Dolores, after learning about the civil rights activist Dolores Huerta, or I'm as strong as the Rocky Mountains when we study geography. Other times I will call back to something our students struggled with that day, like I can control my body, or kind words matter. Most often I have students come up with the phrase themselves. They have said things like, I am a respectful kid, or I've got power in me. Whatever the phrase of the day, it is important to emphasize that effort, hard work, and character matter in our classrooms. The high five goodbye is just one simple way of doing that. Number 2, coach and response. Teachers have been using the call and response technique in their classrooms since, well, forever. Usually, I have seen this used as a way to get attention. When I was a student, my teachers used the tried and true 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, with students responding 1, 2, eyes on you, to quickly get the attention of the class so they could give directions. I get my students' attention in much the same way, and it works. In addition, I also use what I call a coach and response. Its purpose is not to grab attention, but to encourage students, while they are actually doing their work, to use their very best effort and push themselves even when the work is challenging. Students don't stop work and look at me. They yell out their response, which lights a little fire in their bellies, so it's easier to keep going. They are encouraged to persevere and develop grit. For example, when students are writing a paragraph independently, everyone starts off on task and are all working, but then the little murmurs begin. The writing is getting a little harder and students are tempted to play with their erasers or talk about the football game at recess. That's when I use a coach and response. I will shout out, can't stop. They will yell back, and I require it to be loud, won't stop. I follow up with all day, and they respond every day. This simple 2-second exchange acts as a reset button. Students get a small reprieve from being silent, and it reminds the class they are expected to work hard. I see their little nostrils flare, their eyebrows lower in concentration, their faces move just a little closer to the paper or computer they are using. The coach and response can literally be anything, but it should matter to the class. This year, we stole Denver Broncos quarterback Peyton Manning's play call. I said, "Hurry, hurry," and then the students yelled, "Omaha." What that actually means is a total mystery, but to our football-obsessed students, it is motivating. I have heard teachers use lyrics from songs and funny quotes from students. 3 years ago, one of my students came up with his own and said, "What are we? A community." My current students still use that coach and response in our class. Angela Watson, a national board certified teacher and host of the Truth for Teachers podcast, says, "When I lived in DC, I taught many children from Nigeria and Ghana, where call and response techniques are deeply rooted in the culture and extend beyond the classroom walls. Ago ame is a great example to use in the classroom. Hold the notes a little bit. Ago ame. This is a wonderful way to build a community and value the culture our students bring to our school. Get creative and come up with your own coach and response." Here are some calls I use in my classroom. The teacher says, "Can't stop." The students say, "Won't stop." The teacher says, "All day." The students say, "Every day." The teacher says, "Are you ready?" The students say, "I was born ready." The teacher says, "Never give up." And the students say, "Never surrender." The teacher says, "Refuse." And the students say, "To be distracted." The teacher says, "These hands." And the students say, "We'll change the world." Clap, clap. Number 3, College Fridays. While there are certainly other pathways to academic success, attending college can be seen as the epitome of a learning career. Whether a student would become the first in their family to study at university or a college education seems like a foregone conclusion, attending and graduating from college is a shining example of a long-term goal that requires grit. One October, buried deep in an email, I saw that Denver Public Schools was celebrating College and Career Readiness Month, and I decided our students needed to celebrate it in our classroom as well. I began by asking a simple question to my students. What is college? Kara's hand shot up to save the day. Kara was a wonderfully ambitious student reading a year above grade level in her second language. She excitedly answered, "I know, college is the same thing as 6th grade." Some of my students know about colleges and universities. Some have parents or older siblings who have graduated from college, and some have families who talk about college as an expectation. But for many of my students, college is an unknown concept. If our students are going to attend college, they need to learn about it at an early age. In this spirit, my class began the tradition of College Fridays. Starting College Fridays was surprisingly easy. I enlisted my colleagues to wear college t-shirts on Fridays. One year, teachers even made their own college pennants out of construction paper and hung them in the hallway with pictures of their college days lovingly glued to the edges. I have sent students running around the halls with clipboards, interviewing every teacher and adult they see, asking, "Where did you go to college?" and "What college would you want to go to?" The most important part of College Friday in my classroom might also be the simplest. As we end our week of learning on Friday afternoons, we take the last few minutes of school and look up a college video online. We watch admission commercials for colleges my students have heard of, maybe colleges family members have gone to. We even look up college sports and study abroad opportunities. One Friday, Aurelia presented me with a crumpled up piece of paper that had been in her pocket all day. She said, "I asked a lady at church to write down the name of this college so we would look it up." Then Matthew said, "My brother is in the JROTC, the high school level armed services training program. Can we look that up too?" Soon College Friday grew into a high school Thursday and middle school Wednesday. We even started looking up careers and jobs students were interested in. Soon our students' curiosity had created an uncomplicated career education program. All of this turned into a meaningful and much anticipated time for our students. They started talking about colleges like they were their favorite colors or sports teams, saying things like, "I call dibs on the University of Chicago," and "Janet and I are going to be Ducks at the University of Oregon together." There is power in ending each day and each week with a deliberate conversation about students' futures. It helps connect their learning to their future goals. Our class knows we are not learning fractions because they're on a test. We are learning fractions because they help us understand the world, and we need to understand the world if we are going to do great things. More importantly, a genuine discussion of future possibilities tells students they have the ability to accomplish their goals. Number 4, You can get away with it. I tell students they can get away with anything in my class. Yes, I tell them that, but I do so to emphasize that learning is a choice. I start by pointing out that they already made the choice to come to school. I say, you chose to come to school to get your education. You chose to come to school today because you know that learning gives you power. Our class needs you here. Thank you for making this choice. Even in elementary school, but especially as they get older, students really can choose to go up for school or not. We can punish students or incentivize them to learn, but at the end of the day, it comes down to each student's personal choice to pursue learning. Acknowledging that choice gives students power. It clearly places accountability in a student's hands and goes beyond just physically being present in the classroom. Making a choice to learn takes grit, and we should call that out for our students. A major part of my reading instruction is sustained reading. This means students are reading books for enjoyment and practicing literacy skills we have discussed for 45 minutes to an hour each and every day. In my classroom, each and every child practices what our class calls power reading. Some students lie on desks, sit in comfy beanbags, or sit back to back with a friend. One particular student liked to read hanging upside down, draped over a chair. Regardless of how they sit, I expect each and every one of my students to be reading. The challenging thing for me as a teacher is reading is 100% choice for my students. I can enforce that they hold a book and sit quietly, but I can't jump inside their brains and make them sound out words. I address this choice in deliberate ways. As a class, we make charts that compare and contrast power reading and fake reading. Students act these out and see if their partners can tell the difference. I tell my students the story of Joe, a former student who is a very skilled reader. He came into third grade able to read the more challenging text better than any other student in my class, but as the year went on, he struggled to make the choice to read. Instead of pushing himself, he chose the easiest books he could find. Often he was just holding a book, looking at it, but not making the choice to read. Joe did well in third grade. He passed every assessment, but he could have done so much better if he had consistently made the decision to do the hard work of reading. In reflecting on this, I think about moves I could have made to engage and encourage Joe to make the choice to read. And being honest with students about the choices they have is one change I have made in my instruction. Now, I tell my students, you can be just like Joe. You can go through third grade and get away with not actually reading. I might not catch you right away, but know that you are making a choice. As a class, we talk about their personal reasons to make the decision to learn. My students this year even wrote an essay explaining why they wanted to become power readers. I see my students make an active choice to learn, not just demonstrate compliant student behavior. What's more, I see students encouraging their peers to make that same choice. Choosing to learn takes grit, it takes perseverance and resiliency, and we need to tell children the truth about this. In an age of school and teacher accountability, we are missing something if we don't teach our students that they are the ones who need to take ownership of their own learning. Number 5, labels are for cans, not people. One night I was at a party chock full of teachers. With a room like that, we could have only been discussing one thing: school. One man made a comment about the success he had found in his classroom with an autistic student. Another teacher at the party said, "You know, you should really say student with autism." He responded, "Why? Just to be politically correct?" She replied, "No, it just makes sure that we are talking about the student first, not their diagnosis or disability. It's just a few extra syllables. You'll get used to it." As teachers, we label students all the time. We use acronyms and proficiency bands as shorthand, saying students are unsatisfactory or advanced. We've all heard terms like good kid and problem student. In our data-driven instructional worlds, our students are placed into buckets, each with a corresponding label. Yes, teachers do need to be able to categorize in order to group students with similar needs so we can deliver highly targeted instruction. We also need to leverage the different abilities in our classrooms. We need to be able to describe the barriers affecting our students, but I argue we can do this in ways that do not put fixed and self-determining labels on them. I propose we get honest with ourselves as educators. Chart out the labels we put on students, all of them. Root out all the little ways we describe students in conversation, in documents, and test scores. List them all. It would be wonderful to do these activities with colleagues, but you could just as easily do them as an individual teacher. Then decide, is this a label we want to keep, eliminate, or change? I do not have definite changes to make for all these labels, but I am interested in starting the conversation about it. That being said, I feel there are strong arguments for changing and eliminating some of these labels. It might serve students well to completely eliminate highly charged labels. Our assistant principal at Dual Elementary, Rob Segulia, had a background in teaching students who qualify for special education services. When I taught middle school students, my job was to support students who had documented learning disabilities and also to support general education teachers. Yes, I taught students who had individual education plans, and technically my position was special education teacher, but to the students, I was Mr. Suglia, another math teacher. When he told me this, it was like a light bulb moment turning on. Why can't we refer to a special education teacher as a fifth grade teacher? There is power in this, says Suglia. We placed a strong emphasis in co-teaching. A team of teachers planned together and truly collaborated. In this way, both the general education teacher and the special education teacher were equals. That equality and collaboration is what we want to model for all students. With this in mind, I believe the education community should reimagine the term gifted and talented. To me, it does not seem appropriate. To begin with, who's giving out the gifts? And why have so many of my brilliant students received this golden designation? In some situations, the gift these students receive seems highly correlated to which zip code they live in, which language is first spoken to them, or how much income is in their home. That's not to say there aren't students out there with tremendous skills that need to be supported and pushed. I know some of our students have different needs, and sometimes they need to be challenged in a different way than their peers. While we have a real need for this extension to traditional classroom work and professional expertise, labeling some students as gifted and talented, in essence defining their skills as passive and fixed, implies that other students are not. This does not fit with what we know about the ability to improve one's intelligence and skills, or the inclusive communities we are trying to create. The labels placed upon students are not benign. They affect our students and our teaching. We owe it to students to carefully consider the language we choose. Labels are for cans, not people. By being deliberate and intentional about all labels issuing from our classrooms, we can help empower our students. What's more, we can allow students to believe in their own ability to accomplish their goals. Number 5, choose your level. I have discovered that there is nothing third grade students want more than to be fourth grade students. Similarly, third grade students want desperately to distinguish themselves from their younger second grade peers. There is something magical about that one day that changes us from one grade to the next. We all remember that single day when we become a mature, sophisticated high school sophomore and could look down with pity on the clueless freshman. I discovered this when I was having my students use a rubric to evaluate their writing. In the rubric, I gave my students real examples of what a particular essay would look like at 4 different levels, but I didn't label each category with a number, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Instead, I wrote first grade, second grade, third grade, or fourth grade. This worked well because 3 or third grade was the level of proficiency I wanted them to achieve. During the lesson, I said a second grade essay would have a basic topic sentence, while a third grade essay would have a clear topic sentence that gives the reader context, and a fourth grade essay would also have a clear topic sentence that gives the reader context, but also lays out the organization of the essay. I knew I was onto something when I was interrupted by a student who asked, "But what would a fifth grade essay have?" Since then, I have used this method to let students choose their own goals. For important skills my students absolutely need to master before the end of the school year, I simplify my rubrics to only 3 categories: second grade, third grade, and college. Here is a real example from my classroom. Skill: composing a sentence that clearly describes the central message, lesson, or moral. Second grade: in this story, the lesson is when blank, you should blank. Third grade: in the text, the lesson the author wants to teach the reader is when faced with blank, you should blank. College: it is clear the central message the author attempts to illuminate through the text is when one blank, one might blank. Allowing students to choose their own level creates motivation for improvement. It teaches them how to set and achieve goals specific to their abilities in the moment. No longer is there writing good, bad, or almost. It is a matter of choosing which level a student is choosing to work at. Students are remarkably good at self-selecting the level that is best for them. Using this system, I rarely have to encourage students to challenge themselves because the format itself requires them to take charge of the level of work they produce. My offering students choice and a clear path to the next level. They develop self-efficacy while being provided the motivation to constantly get better and move up levels. Good teachers believe in their students' abilities. Great teachers teach students to believe in their own abilities. We only have our pupils for a finite amount of time, which means we plant the seeds, yet rarely see the harvest. As educators, we cannot merely teach content or standards. We must teach our students how to learn. And that means we need to teach them that they can learn, that they already possess the ability to progress and improve. This trait is essential if we want our students to become lifelong learners. By teaching a growth mindset and developing soft skills like optimism and grit, we encourage students to develop the confidence of a learner and be accountable for their own education. When we take the time to deliberately and explicitly teach our students to have a strong sense of self-efficacy, we cultivate a community of learners that can't be stopped.